You're listening to Parasearch Radio. News, views and reviews from the world of the paranormal from across the UK and beyond. Find us on Facebook, Twitter and the World Wide Web. The views and opinions expressed by presenters and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Parasearch Radio or their affiliates and sponsors. Listener discretion is advised.
Good evening and welcome to the Dark Mirror Show. My name is Kerry Greenaway and it's a bit of a different one tonight because I've got Mr. Carl Hutchinson I'm waiting to join, and Mark unfortunately can't join us tonight because he had issues with his family, as we talked about on the live on Monday. So unfortunately, well, you've got me, and I've also dragged my Tuesday co-host, Mr. Paul Rook, into the room. Good evening, Paul. How are you?
Good evening. Yeah, I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm really good, thanks. But my other co-hosts, they've all deserted me.
Nice to be on your show for a change.
I know, right? Oh, this would be a calmer affair, I feel.
It would. Aliens. There you go.
Aliens,
not as good
indeed.
As mine.
No, we don't quite manage it, do we?
No, but no one can manage it as well as Mark.
No, this is very, very true. This is true. So, I've added Carl to the call, so if he decides to turn up, then, you know, he can join in. But we're talking about psychic detectives tonight, following on from last week's show when a court case actually used evidence of some, you know, of a ghost basically coming and talking to the victim's mother. And we talked about that concept, but this is not a new concept of psychic detectives. This is like the other end of the scale, isn't it? Before it goes to trial, where police and, you know, people investigating the crime actually invite a psychic, or psychics give their impressions of what happened in a crime. So that's what we're talking tonight. Now, there's been many TV programs about this across you know, the years. The one I remember the most is Sensing Murder. Have you watched any of those, Paul?
I wouldn't be able to tell you what they were called, but I have seen a few programs where the local police or a medium has gone up to the police and given details of certain things, then the police have gone and checked. And there's one particular one I remember quite not so long ago, actually, where I think it was it wasn't a medium, it was a case of free life. You know, like the children ghosts in our children, that sort of thing.
Mm. Oh, what, like a reincarnation type thing? It's gone all quiet on me.
Yeah, that's exactly. So he has been murdered.
Oh.
Hello?
Hello? Are you there? Because this is going to be...
I'm still here.
Oh, good. So...
Yeah, I'm still here.
I was thinking about this concept of using psychics in cases. Yes, I think they can be useful. I think it becomes dangerous when you get a very high-profile case and then sort of like all the... I noticed this happened in the Madeleine McCann case. They had a plethora of people saying they had psychic abilities contacting them with relevant information regarding the disappearance of their daughter. And it became almost like a bit of a circus in regards to that. Yeah. And that's where I think the danger is. I don't actually have a problem with the police using them, but I do have a problem with psychics getting in contact and offering their help when it hasn't been asked for.
You also get that, though, as soon as the police go public with any case asking for people to come forward, you always get some of the strange people ring up just to be giving the police false information or just to be sort of included in that case, if that makes sense. I don't know why they do it, but, you know, and that's just appeals for normal information, let alone the medium side. And I think a lot of mediums, you know, however they get this information, they just pass it on because they feel they need to pass it on just in case it is something. Mm. So I can understand from a medium's point of view that they want to do that to try and help.
Yeah,
but sometimes, as you said, they can hinder the case. Because it is about building evidence sometimes for some cases.
If a detective is...
I'm in a bit of two minds whether or not police should do that. Do use mediums and stuff in cases, though. I mean,
moan about...
but then as a last resort, sort of things, trying to find bodies. Like the Moors murders, and you've got. Isn't there still one child unaccounted for?
Yeah, there is. Yeah, Keith Bennett.
It would be nice. I mean, I don't know. Maybe the family think differently, but I thought it might be nice to get a bit of closure. So if a medium did know or did come by the information to find out where this child is, go to the police. So the police can go and check it out, and if they do find him, all well and good, and that family can have a bit of closure. So again, in that respect, it's good. So I'm sort of on the fence with this one. It
is a tricky one, isn't it? It is a tricky one. I think it's actually used more than people realise. Psychic medium tool. I think, like I say, I don't have a problem with the police approaching a psychic medium specifically and asking them to get involved. To see if they can throw up any new leads, particularly, as you say, particularly when it's a tricky case, a missing persons case, if it gives them further leads that they can then look at to build a more evidential case, I don't have a problem with it at all. And I do think that's been very relevant. I know in the Soham murders, the Jessica and Holly case, the police did actually employ a psychic medium who came up with a man and a woman and the place where the girls were found, and that's how they had their suspicions, but they couldn't find the bodies. The minute they found the bodies, then everything the jigsaw fell into place, as it were. But they used that psychic medium, allegedly, from what I read anyway, to locate the girls' bodies. And then after that, the rest, they say, was history, and it all seemed to the evidence, the hardcore evidence that they could go to court with, slotted into place, and that's how come they ended up getting the convictions that they did. So I do think they do have a place. I do have a problem with you offering that help without being asked, if that makes sense. Like where you just send a letter saying, "Oh, I'm a psychic medium, and I've got this, and this, and this, and this, and hopefully it will help you locate your daughter."
But then how would you feel if, for whatever reason, you got a psychic message come through to you that pinpointed a murder victim and the murder weapon, for example, and you did nothing to pass that on?
Again, tricky one, isn't it?
This is why I thought, my thought process would be that, just pass it on. Let the police check it out, because at the end of the day, they're going to be building the case. And see, when it comes to court, I think they would have to say, like, "Oh, we was approached by this lady who had information. She passed it on. We checked it out. We found the evidence." They wouldn't be able to say, "Oh, yeah, it was ghosts that told us."
The problem is, again, it's very ethically difficult to say, isn't it? Because if I put yourself in that position, if I received that, my instinct would probably be to go to see if it validated for myself. So I would probably go. But there's been a case of this with a nurse went missing, and her name was Melanie Urib, or I don't know how you would say her last name, but a clairvoyant, Etta Smith, actually received these images regarding where Melanie had gone. So she actually did go and look for her herself, found the body, and then the police showed up, and of course they arrested her for suspicion of the murder. Obviously they questioned her, detained her, and then further identified the real people that killed her. But it put her in a problem, didn't it? It put her in that position of
because
being suspected. Yeah, because why would you be there? Well, I'm a psychic medium. I got these impressions. I thought I'd check it out, and here she is. It's like one of those, isn't it? It's very difficult.
I mean, there was that program, wasn't it? Wasn't it called Medium? The blonde lady that used to go and help the police solve some of the crimes and stuff. Because that's based on a true story, isn't it?
I don't know. I haven't watched that one, but Mark was talking about.
I think Alison de Moray. I don't know, something like that. I can't remember.
I think
it was a while ago.
Yeah. That wasn't that one with David Tennant in it as well. Anyway, getting off topic with that one. But can you imagine receiving those kind of impressions as a psychic medium? How do you cope with that? You know, getting mental images of like murders and deaths and, you know, that sort of thing, and knowing that kind of information. How do you cope with that yourself? That must be horrible, being in contact with somebody who's been murdered and knowing the details of the case.
I mean, how would they see it? I mean, would they see it through the eyes of the murderer or the victim? Or are they there as a third person? So it depends on I suppose how they see it.
But when you're a psychic medium, it comes to you through senses, doesn't it? So sometimes you're feeling it, sometimes you're sensing it, sometimes you're tasting it, hearing it, you know, and then seeing it. So all your senses come into play as a psychic medium. So you would be kind of like reliving the crime through their eyes. So you're living it.
Yes,
the spirit themselves is living it as well to get that message across.
Yeah, so I wouldn't even like to hazard a guess how that comes across, because I just simply don't know. I've got no psychic ability whatsoever, so it's like it's just imagination for me. I can't even comprehend.
No,
it comes through.
Yeah, it is a tricky ethical position, isn't it? But then if a policeman come to you, say you were a psychic medium, and a policeman comes to you and says, okay, we've got this case, can you tell us what your impressions are on this case? Which I have to say, I was quite frankly on some of the programs, I loved Sensing Murder. I really, really enjoyed that program. But they were cold cases. These weren't active cases. These were cold cases. Yes, Andy, it is live. And so what you then have to go by is it an active case? Is it a cold case? Do you see what I mean? If it's a cold case, you're going on, you might be able to provide extra leads for the police to then maybe turn that cold case into a closed case, which would bring comfort and closure, like you say, to the family. Well, if it's an active case, while it's ongoing, no one's going to admit they're using psychic mediums, and you can't use any.
I think it's almost like the last resort. You know, they haven't got any leads, they don't know what or where to turn. So why not approach a medium and see whether or not they can shed a little bit of light somewhere, and you know, they can go and check it out, grab some more evidence, and then that might be just enough to clinch it. But it's just a case of saying, like, okay, we've received new information, we looked there, we found, I don't know, the murder weapon, linked it to that person, we nabbed him. You know, that, and then when it comes up in court, they're not turning around and saying, well, yeah, we approached a medium, ghost told her where the murder weapon was, because they'll have a field day and the murderer get off. And it'd be a big whole debate whether ghosts exist.
Yeah, the drive, though, is that they provide leads effectively so they can build then a hardcore evidence case. You'd never take a psychic medium into the courtroom. You'd never do that. It would be inadmissible, wouldn't it?
It would, because you'd have... I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, courts are religious, aren't they? Because they're you know, they're when you stand up in court, hand on a Bible, and it's all very, like, especially in America, in God we trust and all that sort of stuff, you know, and it goes against God, and it for spiritualism in their eyes. So,
I mean, in many cases, they release a certain amount of information to the public, but always hold stuff back, don't they? They'll always hold certain key points back. So if anybody comes forward, that it's a part of a screening process, I would imagine. If you know certain details that haven't
Yeah.
been released, then, well, red flag. So also with psychic media, they're coming up with stuff that hasn't been released previously into the public domain. It adds more relevance to the impressions that they're picking up. And so, no,
Yeah.
they don't have to make public the process of how how they gathered the information for conviction, Richard, because what they're doing is they're not using the psychic medium as the be-all and end-all. They're having to build hardcore forensic evidence to back up their reason for taking or convicting that person. So it's not a question of that psychic medium as part of that process. You have to back it up with hardcore evidence. So no, the psychic bit is not. They don't have to disclose how they got there, if that makes sense. The evidence stands for itself, as it were.
Indeed.
Now, one other aspect on this I was thinking of, we'll talk about some cases, because there was a horrendous case a little while ago, but I'll bring that up in a minute. It was a lot of policemen say one of the key points of being a good copper is the hunch, policeman's hunch.
Intuition.
That's actually quite a big part of policing. How many times have we heard say, I just had a hunch? Call it a hunch.
Yeah.
They've got nothing to base that feeling on. They've got nothing to go, but it's a gut instinct thing, isn't it?
It is. And when you deal with, criminals like that all the time, it does become second nature.
You must, from a psychological point of view, be able to tune into how they would think.
Yeah, possibly. Don't see why not. Yeah. I mean, years ago I used to be a ticket inspector on the railway, and you could quite easily pick out, as people get off the train, you could quite easily pick out, before they get to you, the ones that didn't have tickets, just by their behaviour.
They say this about customs as well.
Yeah.
They get a feeling, you get to know who are red flag people.
Yeah. Absolutely. You could just browse the crowd and just see 2 or 3 of them. Sometimes you're wrong, but 9 times out of 10 you're not.
So what is that? Is that just experience that drives that? So we're talking about it, say, from a policeman's point of view, or customs, or whatever position you're looking at it from. Is that just a experience perspective? That gut feeling, is that what it comes from?
Yeah, for me it was experience, because obviously when I first started I wasn't like that. But yeah, as time went on, it was quite easy to spot behaviours in people. So yeah, it was a learned experience.
It is a strange one, isn't it? So there's lots of different aspects to this when we started looking at it. And actually, the College of Policing did release even guidelines about the evaluating the use of psychics within a case.
Okay.
And it was actually aimed more at missing people than murder cases specifically. Yeah. It was actually aimed at that. So, yeah.
I mean, that makes sense. I mean, using them to find missing people, that's quite a good idea. Especially in the States. There's so much empty space.
There's a lot of people go missing, isn't there?
Yeah.
A lot of people go missing.
Yeah, exactly. And, just look at the missing 411 you've done.
Well,
it'd be interesting to what psychics make of that.
I don't know. That's an aspect of it we didn't come across. If any psychics have been used in trying to trace any of those people. But that is an interesting one. Go check that show out, guys, if you missed that one. Now, the guidelines state that any information received from psychics should be evaluated in the context of the case and should never become a distraction from the overall investigation.
Yeah, so it's still basically building the hard case and coming by information, even if it is from a medium, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
That's essentially what they're saying. So, yeah.
And also, I think family members sometimes want to involve the use of a psychic as well. You know, it's not just from the police perspective, but, you know, if one of my kids went missing and the police weren't really seeming to be doing an awful lot or coming up with any leads, I would, like, call on all my psychic friends to, like, help out. You know, I would. But then I've got a belief system in it. So I would use...
a party first, though.
A party? Yeah.
Yeah, you'd have the party first before the kids were returned.
Yeah. Right, now we've got the fun bit over, now we really need to find them.
Yeah, that's it, exactly.
People are asking questions, I kind of need to find them.
Yeah.
So it is, I can understand a family wanting to involve any avenue that might help locate your loved one that's gone missing. I say missing persons cases, it's difficult, isn't it? Because you want to find them regardless of the...
Exactly. It's about closure, isn't it? Because if your child's missing, then it's just the questions: what happened? Where are they? Are they still alive? They're like the big three, aren't they? Really?
Yeah.
But if you was there, at least told, okay, we have found a body. It is your child. You've got that closure. You can then have the funeral. You know, say, and it is that. But to know, it just leaves it all open, and that I can't imagine what that would like. To be fair, because it must be really awful.
Yeah.
Just to not know.
To not know, and to utilise every avenue possible. I can understand that. But then our police do get very involved in the cases that they're most, you know, high-profile cases or people missing cases. They do get very attached, don't they, to the case? It becomes you've got to solve it. To have an unsolved case, I mean, even down to Detective Aberline, the Jack the Ripper case haunted him for years because he didn't solve it.
Well, that's it. I mean, yeah, they do get really involved, and you know, you just can't help it. I mean, if you do start spending time with the family and stuff, you get to know the family, and it does extend to the officers as well, I'm sure.
I would have thought so.
They would want to get answers for the family.
Yeah.
You know, so I can understand that. I think that's why they have like a family liaison officer come in to the family and spend time with the family, so you can get to know them and get to know all about the missing person. You know, and you know that helps as well. So while all the other officers are about doing the rest of the case, you've got the family liaison sitting there and learning everything about the family. Because they reckon that 9 times out of 10, when someone's murdered, it's by someone they know. So,
that's one of the reasons as well, isn't it? It's usually somebody quite close to them, you know, unfortunately. But it is an incredibly fascinating aspect of, again, you know, is it a psi ability, or is it just reading people? You know, if we're saying that a lot of the crimes are perpetrated by people that are close to them, could a psychic medium be just reading people that are close to them and picking up on clues that maybe the police aren't picking up on? I don't know. Yeah, I say, you can look at this from so many different angles. It's untrue. But then a lot of times, if the police involve them, they don't have any contact with the family. It's purely and simply the police officer and the psychic medium working. And obviously the police are very good at hiding their emotional responses. You know, if it would purely... We talk about interviewing techniques. You're not supposed to lead the witness. They wouldn't be leading the psychic medium. It'd be purely just the impressions the psychic medium get. So again, I do think that's very valid. Now, if that's the case, that this is the situation, then that opens up a whole area of research that's not being resourced at the moment that we know of, in regards to working out to see if there is actual psi ability. Because when we talk about going into private cases, not leading the interview. It's very hard to do. Not
Yeah,
ask leading questions. It's very, very tricky to do. And it's a trained technique, isn't it?
it is definitely. I mean, going back to when I was on the railway, we done what's called the Police and Criminals Evidence Act, and that allowed us to, if someone was on the train, with no ticket, no money to pay for it, and they were obviously defrauding the company, we could actually caution them like an officer would, and then we'd have to question them. But we had a notebook like the police do that we could write in, but we also had like a notepad for what we call straightforward cases, where it was just a bog standard 4 questions, and if they said yes to all of them, then we'd just prosecute from that form. But when it got complicated, obviously we had to use the notebook to write in more questions and stuff. It was a nightmare. But yeah, you have to be very careful about how you word things. Very careful. So yeah. It's a trained skill.
I totally agree with that. It's a very trained skill. So if you have got some form of officer, regardless of where they're working, whether it's America, UK, wherever, they're not allowed to ask leading questions. It is basically, here's, a photograph of the victim, what are you getting? And they would then go off from there. And some of the details are really relevant to the case without them knowing the case.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So it would be very interesting if we could, have that information. But of course, it's private and confidential in regards to the case, isn't it? And he's actually brought a point up that Robert James Lees was a medium who involved himself in the Ripper case, but none of his information was of value. So we also get this other side, don't we, where, we may have a medium involved, but it's not relevant. So that's a waste of time and resources in trying to follow up leads that lead nowhere and maybe overcomplicate the case.
Yeah, I can understand that, but at the same time, the police use a lot of psychology, and I do remember watching that documentary about Maddie McCann on one of the streaming platforms, and they said that there was a guy that came forward who, at the time when the young girl went missing, he was very, very helpful, and I think he positioned himself sort of like as a translator for the press to the police, and vice versa. And because he was quite helpful, he displayed the same traits as the guy from the Soham case,
Huntley. And it red flagged it, didn't it?
Yeah, and they thought, hang on a minute, right? Because he's like that, it could be him. So the police then started concentrating on him. So even their skills and their psychology, it doesn't always pay, because obviously it wasn't him. He was I don't think he ever went to trial or nothing, did he? But
no, but he was held, wasn't he? And his place was questioned, and his place was ransacked as well by the Portuguese police. And he was just trying to be helpful in a really horrendous situation. But it does open up that door, doesn't it, of that then hinders, does it? Because now if someone like that becomes a suspect,
it takes away.
You don't want to then help,
doesn't it? Because if they're following the clues and then they suspect someone else, they're going to transfer the resources from looking to concentrating on what this guy's doing. They follow him and stuff and whatnot and investigate him. So it's taking valuable resources from actually looking for her. And that was
media. Yeah, that was media driven though, wasn't it? Hang on, he's been really helpful. Wasn't Huntley really helpful? And could it possibly be him? I can't remember the guy's name, but it was an awful situation for that man. He was innocent and just trying to be helpful. But as I say, going back to psychic mediums in that situation, they've had a hell of a lot of people send them letters and, what they think. And even public psychic mediums putting forward their perspective on it. But then don't we come back to, I was talking earlier and I was saying sometimes the message that's given by spirit is the interpretation by the medium is not always correct.
Absolutely. I mean, a medium friend of mine, she's always said that, spirit are never wrong. It's all, they put the message into her head, and it's her interpretation that is the wrong. So the weak link in any reading is always the medium.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just that medium's interpretation of what the message is. So this is why they can get things wrong. Personally, I don't know. I'm not too sure. It just seems like a good answer, just in case they get it wrong. Do you know what I mean?
No, it's because it's the medium, because you're the medium in the middle. You're the medium in between spirit and the real. So you're passing on a message. So what they're saying is you should give it exactly how you receive it, no matter how bizarre it sounds to you. It's not about you. You should just literally just give it as you get it, no matter how bizarre that sounds.
It just seems to me like a bit of a cop out sometimes. It's like, if I get it wrong, then I've interpreted it well. You could have got it wrong because you just don't know.
Well, this is true. Well, this is kind of true.
But I'm sceptical about them anyway. So.
But they have proved useful in cases that we know about. But there is a case. This is a case that happened in Devon, which involved the disappearance of a 13-year-old schoolgirl called Jeanette Tate. Now, this is quite a long time ago. I don't know the exact date of it, but it is an ongoing investigation. She never got found. The problem is it all got mixed up with so much other stuff that wasn't relevant. On the day she went missing, the front page of the newspaper, she was delivering newspapers when she went missing, but the front page actually had a ufology case, a UFO sighting over in Exeter. It was a very good photo. Everybody wasn't verified. It was just front page news. So then the ufology people stepped in and said, oh, she was abducted. And then this opened it up because 1978, sorry, this was. And she literally just disappeared without a trace. They had no leads at all. They just had none at all. But at that time in history, spiritualism and use of spiritualism was very, very prevalent. Think of Uri Geller. He was on our TVs all the time doing bending spoons with the power of the mind. UFO sightings, all sorts of things were going on in the media regarding that. And they had an absolute influx of people saying that, bringing forward information that they said that they'd received in regards to this case. Now, in the end, they actually got somebody in to actually try and help solve this case. And this is where it becomes difficult. As they were driving him around the area, he told them to stop and go to this barn. And he said, oh, there's a murder there. So they all went and looked at this murder, and he went, oh, it's not yet. He couldn't pinpoint whether it's past, present or future. And he said, oh, it's going to happen. There's going to be a murder in there. But he was trying to pinpoint the case on this Jeanette girl, but couldn't because his impressions are getting from past, present and future. So it confuses the issue again, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. It's sort of like precognition of a murder, but was there anything ever reported there?
It doesn't say. All it says was that because of his inability to focus on a specific case, it was no use to them at all in any way, shape or form. In that particular case, it just confused the issue, and it just wasn't very helpful.
No, I can imagine that. Yeah, because you just didn't know. So just count that one and move on to the next one.
The problem is they had so many. The family hadn't asked for this influx of people trying to help. And it went across the board. It went from ufologists through to dowsers, to psychic mediums, to people who said they were witches, to people that, said that parapsychologists, that they had like letters after their name and, academic-y type people that worked in that way. Confused the issue completely. The case, as far as I know, has not been solved, and actually caused a lot more anguish to the family that was involved.
Yeah. I mean, I can imagine, like, as I said to you earlier, you got all these people and they're receiving some messages and they're just, I don't know whether they're assuming it's about that case or not, or it is genuine messages from the other side, and they just want to help because that's the nature of people. Most people just want to help. So they will pass on that information, and it's really down to the police then to check it all out. Obviously, if you get a huge influx, so they'd have to screen it somehow. But you get that sort of thing, as I said, from normal people without any psychic. The cases go live, and you get the appeal on the telly. They get inundated.
But it's a waste of police resources if they're following up.
Inundated.
But it's a waste of police resources if they're getting inundated, which, yes, sometimes they need the help. They need the leads to be able to help close the crime. I'm not saying that they don't, hence why Crime Watch is so successful on TV.
Yeah.
I mean, God, they've managed to solve some great crimes by putting things out on Crime Watch and, cases that have kind of dried up.
Yeah, I think it's just a case of how the police screen the calls. As you said, they do omit some information. So they're just waiting for a phone call that uses certain words. And again, I think, well, okay, that wasn't Republic. Concentrate on rather than 10,000 Joe Bloggs that's only just read the paper today.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree.
So, yeah, I think it's down to their screening process, yeah.
But there are, like I say, there are cases where psychic mediums have been used and has been incredibly helpful. In 1984, Arthur Herbert and his 3 passengers disappeared in a plane. No clues. It was like a nightmare. He couldn't find it, couldn't find the plane, couldn't find any information on it. So they kind of were like, well, we don't know what to do. Now, Herbert's sister, Jessica, enlisted the help of a psychic detective, Noreen Renier, who gave the exact coordinates of the crash site.
Okay.
She went there. They went there. Plane was found. People were found. The 3 passengers were found. So there are cases where it has been useful. I do think it's a useful tool, but I would rather it come from the police approaching somebody to ask for help in regard to psychic, rather than psychics just like offering it without help, not asking asked for help. Because don't they say the road to hell is paved with good intentions?
Yes, definitely.
Hell being a theme of the day.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that does make sense. Yeah.
Another one in 1973, they were unsuccessful in finding the killer of Penny Sarah. They turned to another psychic called Pascarella Downey. Now, there's a name. They said that they wouldn't find Sierra's murderer right away, but to look for a mechanic whose name started with an E. And she predicted that they would connect him to the murder by blood. It took 26 years to find Edward Grant, formerly a mechanic. He was later arrested, blood tested him. That connected him with evidence that they found at the crime scene of Sarah, her name was. Yep. And he was convicted and sentenced to 20 years life in prison. So, again, quite relevant, that one, right?
Yeah, it took a while. Absolutely. It took a while, but they got there in the end. Yeah.
Yeah, helpful. But
it can be.
I think it can be, but again, it's the police or the family approaching a psychic to bring them in to help, rather than the other way around. Rather than it just being offered. And I think that's the point. I think if the police are employing a psychic medium, generally they will have checked out the credentials. I mean, the other side of it is people are contacting people saying, I've got impressions coming through, but it's going to cost you £90, for example, for me to give you this information. So I think motive is probably a key point in this too.
I think so, definitely. Yeah, Because I don't think the police would go, well, okay, there's your 90 quid, now tell us who the murderer is. Because, again, that's withholding. Would they be able to be done for withholding evidence?
And then we go down to,
work.
is any impression that you get from a psychic, it's not admissible as evidence, is it? So no, I don't suppose they can. Oh, that's a tricky one, isn't it?
Isn't it? Because if they've got information that could lead them to the murder weapon, for example, and they withhold that, then surely that stands to reason, and they could be done for withholding information pertaining to their case, perverting the course of justice. I really don't know legally how that would stand. We need a lawyer on, I think.
Or a police officer who's used a psychic medium. It is an incredible. It is an incredibly interesting ethical argument, isn't it? But again, I always go back to, like, if I want a reading from somebody, just a general old reading, nothing to do with policies and cases and stuff like that, I'm prepared to pay for that. And I don't disagree with people making money out of, that talent, I suppose you'd call it. But, and I have done. I've paid for readings before in the past, but I've approached them. They haven't come to me saying, Kel, I've got some information for you, but it's going to cost you this. I get quite a lot of spam like that, and I just dismiss it straight away. Like, yeah, whatever, no. But if I was like, if it was to do with a court case, if you went to a police officer and say, got this information for you, but it's going to cost you. I'm sure they probably would throw that argument, whether or not it would stand up and they would actually be able to legally do it. I'm quite sure that they would say, if you're withholding evidence, then that's a serious crime in itself,
Absolutely. It is quite a dodgy ground, because I do remember, and we're probably going back about 10 years now, there was a story in one of the papers that said that a murderer was acquitted. It was in the UK. A guy was acquitted for murder because the jury decided to do a Ouija board to find out whether or not he was actually guilty. But because they done the Ouija board at the hotel and not in the juror's room, and the judge found out, he basically threw the case out. But if they had done the Ouija board in the jury's room, then he would have been done. Because of the legal system, it's like the judge isn't allowed to know what goes on in the juror's room. So if they went into the juror's room and done the board there, and it come out guilty, then the judge has to take that result. But because they done the Ouija board in the hotel and the judge found out about it, it's like, you can't do that. I'm throwing the case out.
Did he throw the case out, throw the jury out, and re-establish a fresh jury?
He just stopped the whole thing. Yeah. I mean, it was going back 10 years, so I don't know whether the system's been changed now. I don't know, but yeah, it happened.
It is dodgy ground, though, isn't it, when we look at it? Because nothing has been, set in stone or proven. So we can't prove that ghosts of people come back who have been murdered and give evidence, give psychics impression. We can't prove that. We can't prove that people have got... We build cases for it. Lots of studies have been done on psi ability and psychic ability, but it's still not something that is acceptable.
It's scientifically not proven, so therefore you can't use it as evidence. That's the bottom line to it, really, because you can't prove or disprove that ghost exists. So you can't use a ghost as a witness.
Or as leading to evidence, unless you can back it up with hardcore evidence, like forensics and stuff like that. Yeah,
and this is, if mediums do come onto cases and stuff like that, they point the police in the right direction and say, okay, look in that direction, you'll find the murder weapon here or there or whatever, and the police will just act on information given, and that's how they're presenting it. Yeah. We acted on information we discovered, and we found the murder weapon. We got the forensics off of that, and they won't even mention the fact that it was a medium. It'd just be a case of, well, someone come forward with a bit of information, we followed that up, and we got the killer. Or whatever. So, yeah.
To piece it together afterwards, so they find, the body, or they find, like you say, the murder weapon, or whatever it be, and then they then can... Yes, Joe Bloggs was walking down the road and dumped the knife, for example, over the wall, and carried on walking into the pub, and had blood splatters on the base of his shoes or whatever. Build it up from that, even though the initial lead may have come from a psychic medium. They've then backed it up with hardcore evidence of proving that the person who perpetrated the crime was where they were, to have the opportunity, the motive, the opportunity, the means, all those factors that come into proving beyond reasonable doubt that person committed the crime.
Yeah, it's almost like, the police go so far and then they hit like a bump in the road, and a medium will just come along and flatten that bump down, and they can carry on. That's almost what it's like, isn't it, really?
Yeah, it sounds like it to me. From the cases that I was reading, it always seems to get to a point where they don't know what else to do. They've followed all the leads that they could at that point, and then couldn't go any further. Now, whether that's involvement by the police themselves or the family have asked a medium to get involved, I don't actually see a problem in that. And there are some very, very good mediums out there. There are some incredibly good mediums out there.
Yeah, absolutely. There are some really good ones, but then there's a lot of charlatans ones as well. And that, I think, is some of the problem.
And this is where we come up against a cropper on a lot of psychic mediums, isn't it? Is that they get accused of being frauds, that they're just reading, very good at reading body language. I mean, God, Darren Brown's one of the best in the business at reading people and using psychological techniques to find out things, not crime, not saying it's crime, but just in general. We're seeing that a lot more what's the term that they're called? They're called... they're not magicians anymore, are they?
Illusionists?
Yeah, but isn't it mesmerizations or something like that?
Oh, I don't know.
I don't know, but there's lots of techniques that people can use to find information out from a person without actually having any psychic ability whatsoever.
Yeah. It's just reading someone, isn't it, I think, and looking at the behaviour and the eye patterns, and there's so much involved in it.
I mean, you looked into this a little bit when you was talking about the Barnum effect, didn't you? Once, that's quite a long time ago now, though.
Oh, we're going back about 5 years for that one. There is like the Barnum statement. It was very vague, wasn't it? If I remember rightly, I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was like, this is going to happen to you, but if it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, they tended to be very generalised.
It might
statements.
do soon, And, it's just, definitely look that one up, the Barnum statement.
Yeah, because it's when a psychic medium says that they're reading you, but makes it very general, and then waits for cues from you as to see if they're on the right tracks, if I remember rightly.
Yeah.
So, like, they'll say, I've got an older gentleman in spirit. Have you got an older gentleman that passed? It could be a grandfather link. And then waits for you to go, yeah. And you're judging the person in front of you age-wise. They look at around the age that they could have lost their grandparents or their dad, or do you know what I mean? So you're going that way, and then you're waiting for affirmations from the person to go, oh, yeah, that'd be my granddad. Yeah, that'd be my granddad, or whatever, and then going on that. And it's very generalised statements, but you buy into it because you're there, because you want to believe and have comfort and trust that the information you're getting is from your granddad, but it's not. It's actually just
Yeah.
somebody reading somebody incredibly well. And as I say, we've seen.
They don't always stick to the Barnum statement either. I mean, I have been to. I used to go to medium nights quite regular to see different mediums, and there's one particular one that said they were giving their reading, and he said like, there's a picture on a mantelpiece. And she's like, well, yeah, we got the fireplace, but there's no pictures. He said, oh, well, you should have some. That's what they're telling me. You should have some pictures up there. And I thought, that's just so ridiculous. It was just like, oh, I can see pictures on a fireplace, and I haven't got any of those. Oh, no, you should have them. That's what he's saying. Yeah. And I could do that. The next week I was up on stage and doing it.
And if you believe Paul Rook is a psychic medium,
it was so it was awful. That particular medium, I can't remember the life of me what the name of the guy was anymore. But
well, we wouldn't name them anyway.
Yeah, I wasn't impressed with that one. No.
Like there are a lot of frauds out there, so you do have to be careful. But I would say if someone's asked to be involved in a case, I mean, some of the ones I watched on Sensing Murder, I know it's a TV programme, I know it would have been edited, I know all of those factors, but some of them are absolutely incredible with some of the information they were coming forward with. And on cold cases, really old, Deborah Spelling was one that I was always blown away by with the information she got. Was it faked for TV? I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you get to hear all these sort of stories, and you see programs like that, but are they faked, or is it one of those factual documentaries that go out every so often? So, yeah, I don't really know.
So here's a question for you then. Do you think we're getting overly cynical regarding, because we know a lot more these days, we're not as gullible these days, do you think we're getting over cynical in regards to psychic ability?
I think it depends on what sort of circles you move in. If you move in a circle with some really good mediums and they are good, then you're going to start swaying towards them and believing them 100%. But if you've experienced lots of them, then you do become a bit cynical about who to believe, and you want to try and catch some out sometimes. So it could just be down to that.
It is a very difficult, in a funny kind of way. What you're saying then is that the peer group that's surrounding you influences how you view things.
Yeah, absolutely. People always, it's just human nature that you get the peer pressure, and a lot of people are guided by that. You see it in all walks of life, all different things. That's why you get.
Of course you do.
Yeah.
Of course you do.
Yeah, I mean, I can't see it being any different.
No. It is a thoroughly interesting concept, though, isn't it? And it does bring up a lot of questions in your head. And, regarding the ethical side of whether or not you should use psychic mediums in that way. But the way I see it, as I say, if you've asked for a psychic medium to be involved and it's led to a lead that has, helped solve the crime, as it were, then I'd use them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't see why not. I mean, if there is one that they know of that is credible, or that has come forward before, or they've used before, that has genuinely given them good guidance. And I'll say guidance rather than everything else, to the next clue. That's all they're doing. So I don't see why they don't do them again. Use them again for if they need help. Ask.
Yeah.
No one should ever be afraid to ask for help, especially in those sort of cases, just to get closures for families if needed.
No, I totally agree.
Because I'm sure it'll always be welcome.
Yeah. I mean, I'll give you another case. Paula Brown went missing after partying with friends one night in Australia, this was, and her fiancé actually used a psychic medium to try and find where she was, because, say, she just went missing, so they didn't know what had happened to her. And the psychic used a map and some of Brown's hair to determine her location. So, that brings up a whole different scenario in regards to psychometry, doesn't it? Her body was found by chance by a passing truck driver, but it actually occurred only 1 mile away from where Durant said. Is that a hit, or is that too far out in search? It's only 1 mile out from where he said.
But also, that doesn't also suggest that he could either kill her.
What, the truck driver?
If he could pinpoint where... No, if the psychic could have pinpointed where the murder was, where it took place, doesn't that put him as a suspect as well?
Oh, not if he's got no connections to it whatsoever. And he's been asked by the family to come in. He's not going to... Would you get involved in it if you perpetrated a crime and someone said, "Oh, you're a psychic medium, do you want to come and help me solve this crime?" I'd be like, I'm not getting anything, sorry.
I'm sure, maybe there is some sick individual out there that would. I mean, you could got that with Ian Huntley.
Yeah, I don't know. I would say probably likelihood of them being involved would be very small because they've been approached, but I don't know.
It's there's lots of questions, lots of grey areas, I think.
There are. It is a very difficult one, isn't it? This one. I don't think there's a right or a wrong answer. I think if it fit like the guidelines said, you've got to think of it in the construct of the case, I can't think of the bloody word now, but in context, that's the word I'm searching for there. You've got to think of it in context of the case, and if it's suitable for the case, then possibly maybe use that tool. And as I say, I know for a fact if there was a crime committed against a member of my family and the police had dried up, I would use psychic mediums to try and help garner some more information that might possibly lead to solving that crime. So ethically...
I think to be fair, if anyone kidnapped your kids, they'd want to bring them back.
Yeah.
They'd be like, I can't afford the food bill, have them back.
That is very, very true. Even I can't afford the food bill. With these bills, I send them off to my parents on a regular basis.
Even in that scenario, you'd be in two minds whether to take them back or not.
You've got more money than I have. Go on, you keep them.
Yeah,
it's fine. They're good at washing up.
Oh, dear.
Well, on that note, we've actually come to the end of the show. So thank you so much for joining me, Paul, tonight. It's been an absolute pleasure, as always.
Yeah, it's been good.
It's been an enjoyable one. Tomorrow night, don't forget, you have your Q&A session.
I do. Yeah, so not looking forward to that.
That is over on the Parasearch Radio Facebook group page, going live at 8 p.m. So if you want to ask my lovely Paul any questions on anything pretty much, paranormal obviously, then go over there and be ready for 8 o'clock where he will be going live for his Q&A. Then on Sunday, what's your view, Paul, on Dybbuk boxes?
It's a load of rubbish. Don't like them.
Load of old
It's just
rubbish.
a box. Yeah, it's a box full of stuff.
Well, I'm looking at this concept at 9 p.m. on Sunday evening with the lovely Andy Mercer. We're going to hopefully be breaking down some of the myths and legends that surround Dybbuk boxes and trying to work out whether or not they're a real thing or not. We already know Mr. Mercer's opinion on this one.
Oh, Everyone does, I think, yeah.
But he's going to back it up. He's very knowledgeable, well researched, so you don't just say something without knowing a lot about it. So you need to tune in if you want to know all about Dybbuk boxes and the real truth behind them. On that note, we're coming to the end of the show, so I thank you once again, Paul, for joining me.
No problem. It's been a pleasure.
And join us next week at 9 p.m. for the Dark Mirror Show. And on that note, I'll say good night, farewell, and sleep tight.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to join us for more shows throughout the week. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and the World Wide Web to keep up to date with all the shows right here on Parasearch Radio.